Welcome to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann, the podcast for people-centric leaders, business owners, and HR professionals who know that people are at the heart of business success. Join me and industry experts as we explore the key aspects of building a thriving company, sharing cutting-edge strategies, impactful insights, and the latest trends to help you ignite your business growth. It's time to rev up your leadership, rev up your success. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Rev Up Your Business. Today I have with me Talica Davies, and the topic we're going to talk about is buyers have changed. Has your sales strategy kept up? What a novel way to introduce what we're going to talk about. Talica says, sales isn't broken, but the way people buy has fundamentally shifted. If you're still using the same playbook from 5 years ago, chances are you're feeling the friction. So in this episode, we're sitting down with Talica Davies, sales strategist and fractional CRO, to talk about what's actually happening in today's market. Buyers aren't ghosting you because they're rude. They're drowning in options. AI-driven comparisons and endless decision loops, the old sales school tactics of following up and handling objections aren't cutting it anymore. So I hope that's enticed you to say, wow, I got to listen to this. And I got to listen to this too. So welcome to Talica. I'm so looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Hilda. I am so pleased to be here. I love talking about sales. And so I'm really looking forward to digging into it today.
Well, I remember when we first met through coaching and you were part of my coach's team. And I really loved that you came with this perspective of marketing sales. And then you launched on your own. And in social media, your posts were refreshing to me. They added the sales factor, marketing sales, with the personal touches. And I connected with that. I resonated that. So let's get started. And I know you talked about maybe the first thing to talk about is just understanding that shift in buyer behavior. You got me at that. Like I want to know, what is
Yeah.
the shift?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I have been for, I would say several months now, almost like 18 months. There's this like public discourse on LinkedIn, on social media, about how selling is harder. People are talking about sales
Yep.
feels harder. People are talking about their sales cycles being longer. People aren't closing as much as they used to. And, obviously there are outliers. There are people that are thriving no matter what is happening. Those are like the market makers. But for a lot of us, sales has been tricky. It has been particularly challenging. And I started to dig into this because while, there's a lot of interesting and intense things happening in the world, and it can feel, maybe that's why I've got a lot of US based clients. And, last year they were like, oh, people are nervous about the election. And now it's, oh, people are nervous about the administration. There's always who isn't? But there's always going to be external forces that can influence sales. And I'm like, this kind of goes like what we're experiencing goes a little bit beyond that. And so when I think about, what's happening with longer sales cycles, what's happening with the introduction of AI, I'm seeing overwhelmed buyers. They are inundated with information. They are inundated with choice. And it can cause an analysis paralysis. It can cause longer sales cycles because they are just, there's just so much information. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. And so I view that as less of a flaw in how people sell and more of a fundamental shift in how buyers are making decisions, how they are gathering information, how they are moving through their buyer's journey. A lot of that has changed in the past 5 years. And so I think it's important for sellers to understand what buyers are going through and how what these changes look like, how they're making decisions, and then B, take a look at how they've been selling to ensure that the way that you are guiding your buyers through their buyer's journey is meeting them where they are.
And I so resonate with you. It's like you're inundated. Like before, people didn't phone you because they didn't know your phone number. And of course, now everybody has access to your cell phone. But now they also have access to texting. And people who are saying, hi, are you interested? What about call me? I thought, number one, I don't even know who hi is. Who the heck are you? And I take the decision to say, okay, I don't know you. Maybe I'm missing out on something, but there's probably 90% of you out there that this is not the way to sell to me. And I just go ahead and I delete, and I hope that I haven't made a stupid mistake and I block you. Like maybe you were going to be my $100,000 client for the year, but with AI and cybersecurity, I would rather err on that side. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, you're right. Like the buyer is slow to decide because of the uncertainty. And in doing so, it then impacts on me as a seller as well. It's just this ripple effect of nobody making decisions.
Yeah, it is.
How do you help us as both buyers and sellers? Because often most of my clients are, entrepreneurs themselves. And so this is that dilemma. And definitely it's out there. Thoughts on that?
So the other thing that I didn't mention, but goes part and parcel with how buyers have sort of like how buying has fundamentally shifted, is this concept of like a trust recession. You'll hear a lot of people talk about how we're in a trust recession. And I think you could, that extends beyond sales. Like I have never experienced a time in my life where I would say the general public is mistrusting of the media, mistrusting of the government, mistrusting of their politicians, mistrusting of experts, because, anyone with fingers and a pulse and access to the internet can be, an expert. So we trust is at an all-time low. And you pair that with the fact that there's all this sales technology that allows for sort of mass pseudo-personalized outreach. So I don't know if you or any of the listeners have ever been on the receiving end of what is so clearly part of like a spray and pray campaign. They've just scrubbed your data somehow. Maybe it's a cold DM on LinkedIn or a cold email, a cold call. They know very little about you. There's a lot of assumptions about what you need, and a lot of assumptions about whether you want to give them your time. So all of this is kind of working together to make buyers a little more skeptical. And I think that if you want to make sales a little easier for yourself, I think first and foremost, you need to get really clear on what do I need to be doing consistently to cultivate trust with my buyers. It's not this thing that we do once and then our buyers trust us forever. We need to be showing up where our buyers do their research, where they go to learn about themselves. And we need to be providing valuable information that they can use to perhaps troubleshoot their problems on their own, because those are the types of things that cultivate trust. When we reach out to them, we're not, pitching right away. We are trying to get to know them. We're maybe interacting with the content that they have on their social media platforms. So I think, understanding what it takes to cultivate trust with your buyers and doing that consistently every single day is probably the biggest gift you can give yourself right now in this trust recession.
I love how you stated that and summarized it. The fact that we are in a trust recession. I'd never heard of it termed that way, but it totally makes sense. And I think that's where the buyer beware has almost created this paralysis thing, because who can you trust? And it really is about creating that trusting relationship. I was doing a live event last week or the week before. My week seemed to blur, but I was doing a live event, and one of the people who came to it, I recognized the name. And then when she came, she said, I had to come to this event, Hilda, just during the early days of COVID. You gave me advice. We had to downsize, during the early days of COVID, and you gave me advice, and that was so good, and I still remember it. And I thought, wow, and that's creating that know, like, and trust factors. It's about giving support to others and having them remember that, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't a client relationship that I paid for. It was somebody that asked that, and I shared with them, or I did it on a webinar and followed up with her afterwards. But definitely, it is about creating relationships, and it's showing up and showing you genuinely care instead of what you call that spray campaign. And clearly it's meant to see if I can get you just to talk to me, then I'll convince you that you need what I want. Really? You don't even know my company, and you're asking me to buy something that I'm not even interested in because I don't have that need.
Yeah. And then we're surprised that buyers don't want to talk to us. Like we haven't been respectful in how we've been communicating or reaching out to them. And yeah, just kind of giving salespeople a bad name.
So why do you think people take that much longer? Are there any other things that you want to share? Because I'm sure everybody wants to know, because when I talk to colleagues and stuff, everybody's saying, yeah, it's taking longer in the sales cycle.
Yeah.
There's so much like reluctance and limbo and wait and see mode.
Yeah. So I think there's so many factors that go into this, but I would say first and foremost, buyers are being discerning. They're being more discerning because of that trust recession that we talked about. And so they are taking their time with this decision. They are doing a lot of their own research. They're kind of comparing, they're using AI to sort of help compare and contrast different competitors and different options. So I think, that's part of it. The other part is, especially if you are in the B2B space, if you are selling B2B, and sometimes to a much lesser degree if you sell B2C, but in the B2B space, it has become complex. There are a lot of decision makers that you need to get on board. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of competing priorities. It's really interesting. Like we're kind of living through this time where everything feels urgent and everything feels like a big deal. And so I don't know if you remember the song by Jay-Z, 99 Problems, but he talks about 99 problems. And I would say everyone has more than one problem. The challenge when it comes to selling, and even for our buyers, is they're like, okay, which problem do I solve first? And too few people on the sales side are helping buyers frame the problem. They are helping buyers, or they're not helping buyers prioritize the problem. And so you're going to run into longer sales cycles if you fail to do that, because buyers have competing initiatives. There's so many different things that are competing for their time. If we haven't properly helped prioritize why this is important to solve now, that can really add to a longer sales cycle.
That's true. That's so true. And sometimes, when you're patient and you think, wow, they're busy, and you don't give them that sense of why might this be a priority? Because if it's not a priority, that's fine. But if it really should be a priority, how do we help educate our client to say, yeah, if you do this, you're going to have, in my case, like, you're going to retain your talent. You're going to have more productivity. So investing in, say, their education to be more effective and efficient and to feel engaged and help leaders to do that, you're going to have a more productive workforce. You're going to have increased sales, and then you're going to be able to afford everything else. So this is really an important thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to help people see the priorities when everything seems like a priority.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
And I think that is a big part of the discovery process that sellers should be going through with their buyers, really understanding, well, what other problems might be competing for your attention. And I think another sort of missed opportunity or an area where we can help frame our buyers, so we sell the problem before we sell our solution, is this concept of the cost of inaction. Like if you do nothing, because for a lot of people, they're not necessarily losing out to competitors. If buyers have, taken the time to understand you, your business, your product, and they've talked to you, oftentimes we're not necessarily losing out to a competitor, but we're losing out to the status quo. They've decided to do nothing. And so
Is that the status quo?
well, it's I guess. So what I think is important, because oftentimes you'll hear people talk about return on investment. Okay, so if you work with me, then my average client experiences X, Y, and Z. Return on investment is a tool that sellers will often use to try to help frame, okay, this is the value in the offer that I provide. I actually favor the cost of inaction, because return on investment is future. Like your buyer
Right.
do this in order to experience it. Cost of inaction is something they're suffering from right now. And if you're able to frame that for them and maybe give them an equation so that they can run the numbers on their own, it becomes a really powerful way for them to really understand what the urgency is.
And I find it really interesting because in my business, people think that, oh, well, why would I want to invest in leadership training, or why would I want to create a healthy work culture, right? Where, and let's give the example of somebody who leaves the company and you have to replace them. Well, that's, now you're spending 50 to 200 times the salary to find a new person, and they're not going to get up to speed right away. So that's a cost that they don't see until they pay for it, but they still don't see it because they think, well, got to do a job posting, I'm going to pay whatever I pay. Yeah. What they don't see is that if somebody leaves and they create a problem where human resources processes could have created a smoother thing and less friction. But if somebody leaves and the lawyer is there and you have to pay $60,000, you have to pay it. That's the cost of the action or inaction. So would you have rather spent the $10,000 investment to do or react to the lawyer saying it's going to cost you $60,000 to settle plus my fees? You don't have a choice. But you did have a choice before, but you didn't realize it's a healthy investment, right?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think a big part of developing trust with your buyers and helping move them through their buying journey, making their buying decision, is asking them questions that they have not asked themselves. Like, that is the true power of in sales. It's being able to highlight things they might not have thought about, or expand upon problems they're experiencing. And so I always find it helpful, to prepare those types of questions ahead of time, to put a lot of thought into, okay, here's what they're experiencing. What might they experience next? What is life going to look like for them if they do nothing? What does that cost of inaction look like? And have that ready before the conversation.
And that's so good, because I think when people are new entrepreneurs, they're not thinking about those questions. They're trying to get this sale and they think they know what the buyer might need. So that's excellent. I love that word, cost of an action, and being prepared to think about the questions that they might have. I remember I had on a podcast, we did an exchange. I was on that person's podcast show and they were on mine. And they said, Hilda, for my podcast show, I want you to talk about difficult conversations that we as leaders have. And he asked me like 10 questions in 30 minutes. But they were so good questions. And all of a sudden I thought, this is what my clients keep them up at night. This is what they want and need. And I thought, need to do more of that, Hilda. Put yourself in the client's shoes and help them with those kinds of things. So giving him reins to say, okay, what do you want me to do on your show? This was a good experience. And I think your strategy there is really valuable to entrepreneurs who want to sell something. They really need to think about, what is that buyer thinking, and what solutions do you offer that will help them sleep at night?
Yeah.
you talked earlier about if you're using the same playbook 5 years ago, that ain't gonna work. So what suggestions would you have now to do away with those old school tactics?
Yeah. So some of the old school tactics that I see still being used today, and if I just want to kind of share a caveat, if you are doing this, no need to feel any shame about it, no need to internalize it. Sales is really challenging. We all need to pick things, sales activities that feel good to us. A lot of times we do things that we see other people doing. And so, I don't want anyone to feel bad about using these tactics. My goal is that I can shed some light onto why they might not be working the way that they used to and what you can do instead. So
And
the
thanks for
first,
sharing it that way, because I think many of us are not sellers. So
yes,
that journey is a difficult one
yeah,
anyway. So any suggestions may be helpful, and some of our role models and suggestions we've used from those role models,
yeah,
may not be successful, and may not be successful to us the way
totally,
we're comfortable selling. Because when
yeah,
people see that you're uncomfortable and awkward, then they
hmm,
think there's something wrong here. Is it the product, the person?
yes,
And so you're
yeah.
not going to make a sales if you don't look like I trust you for
Totally,
whatever reason.
you're not instilling confidence.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I love that you brought that up because I talk a lot about sales as a noun versus sales as a verb. So great point. Like a lot of founders in particular, they don't view themselves as salespeople. So few people wake up, when they're a kid and they're going to be like, I'm going to be a salesperson. Like it's just sort of something you fall into as an entrepreneur. It's something you have to do. So I think a lot of founders think of sales as they view themselves within the lens of their expertise, and then sales is a hat they put on. And when you think about sales as a verb, something I do, rather than this is an extension of my expertise or an extension of who I am, that shift from serving to selling is really palpable. So I'll just share that. But some of the other tactics that I see, so I call it spray and pray, but basically I would call this pseudo personalized mass outreach. And so people are collecting emails. Maybe they are collecting, they've done an opt in, but they're basically collecting emails and then they're performing cold outreach. And in this cold outreach, they're trying to pitch a product or a solution. They're trying to invite people to a webinar or a roundtable that they're having. They are trying to invite them. They'll throw their calendar link in and they'll be like, oh, I'd love to connect. That's not cutting it anymore. People don't want to be communicated or approached in that manner. It's kind of like if you were dating and you were in a club and someone came up to you, and even before they said hello, they were like, can I have your number? You would never give someone your number, right? Like they made no attempt to get to know you, to like develop rapport or relationship. So I think if you're performing cold outreach and your approach and your goal of cold outreach is to pitch someone something, you are approaching cold outreach all wrong. I think cold outreach is a useful tool for a lot of business owners. Um, but the goal is to initiate a relationship,
Mhm.
not to pitch them on anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that is an old school tactic that needs to go.
Yep. Yep.
Some of the others, so I think, you talked about not having patience and kind of rushing to a purchase. And I think a lot of a lot of sellers, especially if we don't view ourselves as a salesperson, if we don't have formal sales training, it can be uncomfortable. And basically, when we sell, we are talking about our product or our service. We're
Mhm.
not asking enough questions. The days of like sales pitches, those are over. I would say that curiosity is the biggest advantage and superpower you can have in sales. You don't need to memorize all like scripts. You don't need to memorize all these different talking points or ways to handle objections. You just need to be curious. You need to care about what your buyer is experiencing, what problems they have, what they do to troubleshoot on their own, what might happen if they don't solve them. And you need to ask questions to help frame the problem and what the solution is. So I think that's another sort of strategy that needs to go. This concept of like pitch or pitching.
You've mentioned several times about, the buyer will do some research. They may find out, well, what's the best strategies, what kind of companies sell this kind of strategy and stuff. That role of self-service, and it doesn't just happen in sales. Like when you go to a doctor and they give you a diagnosis, and you search for the different kinds of treatment so you know which doctor you want to go to. Google and technology of today has, and chat GPT or similar AI tools really have given us the intelligence to gather information, so we are smarter than the buyer is now smarter because they can go and find some information.
Yeah.
What advice would you give entrepreneurs and companies who are doing the selling to help them understand that the buyer already has some intelligence? And how do you distinguish yourself from a Google and me as a seller?
Yeah, I love this conversation. I love this question because I saw a stat recently, and it was like 80% of buyers go through their buyer's journey alone, doing their own research, and they've gone through 80% of that journey before they even talk to a salesperson. And I do this all the time. Like if there's an option for me to just kind of like go onto someone's website, go onto their LinkedIn, read their blogs, listen to their podcast, understand like what they're about, how they could help me, I will do all of that before I get onto a call.
Yeah.
It used to be, particularly if you sell coaching and consulting, I would say like 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was much easier to sort of offer a discovery call. And buyers would come on to those discovery calls and use them as a means to learn a little bit more about your program or your offer. Nowadays, buyers their preference is to do much of this on their own. And so I would say my advice is make sure you know where your buyers spend time. Make sure you know what channels they exist on, and make sure you have content there. Make sure you have content that is talking, that is, serving a few different functions. So we want to have content that is creating problem awareness. Sometimes our buyers don't even know they have a problem, right? Like they can be so close to it, they don't even know. So we want to be able to have content that talks about what the problem is to create problem awareness. We want to have content that talks about the solution, and that invites them to have a conversation with us when they're ready. So I think the biggest thing I would say, given that we know buyers prefer to do a lot of their research and move through their decision-making process on their own before involving a salesperson, make sure you have content that helps move them through that decision-making process on the platforms where they are looking for it.
So here's the next question people are thinking. Where do I find these platforms? Where am I supposed to go?
Yeah. So
any thoughts on that?
It will depend. And it is, I don't want to oversimplify and make it seem easy because it's hard to stand out on these platforms. But I would say, so I know who my clients are, and they spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because they are there looking for their clients. And so I know that LinkedIn is where I want to spend the majority of my focus from a marketing perspective. That's where I want much of my content to live. They are on Instagram, but they're not really, that's more of like an entertainment, a reprieve. I choose not to be on Instagram. I choose to be on LinkedIn. So I would say the first step in figuring out where they are is doing really in-depth research on who they are. And you can do this by, thinking about a client of yours whom you would love to replicate. Like if there was one client that you could clone and just have like 5 more like them, interview them, ask them how they found out about you, ask them, where do you go to do this kind of research? If you go to conferences, what are those conferences? Really developing a robust profile. Everyone talks about your avatar, and I find that it's such an overused concept. But if you can think about it in terms of, okay, I have a client that I really adore, that I want to replicate, let's go interview them. Let's find out, where they go to learn, and that will be where I should show up.
How I know, and I know you kind of talked a little bit about the buyer and developing that relationship with them. What are some strategies that you would share that would make it easier for that
Mm,
buyer to say yes? And
yeah.
again, we're many of us are not sellers. I remember when I was deciding in high school, what do I want to do for my life, right? And I the idea of selling, and in those days, it was the real hardcore selling,
Hmm.
door to door, making a sale and stuff. And
Yeah.
that wasn't me. I was more, flexible, negotiating, supporting, guiding, not telling and
Yeah.
selling. So I wasn't in business. I wasn't going to be in business, and I ended up in nursing, which cares about people and supports people. And the people come to me. I'm not going to go to them. So then fast forward, and my husband and I have our own company, and suddenly it dawns on me, I love what I do. I thought, I am selling every day. I am
Hmm.
selling myself. I'm selling an idea. I'm encouraging people to come to our company. I am now selling, but I'm selling in a way that's good for me. So I know what people go through. I've been through it. And I would love for you to share what would make it easier for buyers to say
Mm.
yes to those
Yeah.
of us who are still gaining our confidence and stride
Yeah.
in selling.
Yeah. So you've raised, I think, an excellent point, and it's probably my favorite sort of reframe or part about how I approach sales. So I will always say you cannot outsell a poor sales definition. So I think it's really important for people to define what am I doing when I sell. I define sales as service. When I am selling, I am serving my clients. I really fundamentally believe that's what I'm doing. I've had other clients that define sales as advocacy. When they are selling, whatever it is they're selling, they're advocating on behalf of their buyers. I think that's so important because if you view sales as this transaction,
Yeah,
then it's
yeah,
always going to feel icky and it's not going to feel good for your buyers. And so, if you can define sales in a way that feels aligned to you and it respects your buyers, that makes it become easy for them to say yes. If you've defined sales as I'm going to help you solve your problems, it becomes
yeah,
easier to say
yeah.
yes to that. So, I think the first thing is getting really clear about an aligned definition of what it means, of what sales means to you. What are you actually doing when you sell?
I love this. This is great.
Oh, good. Yeah. And then the second is we need to de risk. We need to be able to de risk our offers. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. Some, I would say, are more strategic and others are tactical. But from a strategic standpoint, um, being able to offer up to your clients, um, ways that make saying yes feel less risky. So I think it's important to have case studies and social proof. A lot of people will have like testimonials, but I like case studies because they're a little more in depth. They give a proper before and after sort of transformation. And I think that's a really great way to de risk an offer and make it easy for people to say yes. So, like being able to cultivate social proof is important.
What do
Um,
you mean by social proof?
yeah, so this would be a case study or a testimonial.
Okay.
One of your clients, sharing or talking about how working with you helped them achieve X.
Okay.
So being able to have that type of, I call that sales collateral, is a really important way to make things feel less risky for your buyers, making it easy for them to say yes. Um,
So would this be in the form of testimonials, possibly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Case
Okay.
testimonials or case studies. Case
Okay.
studies, like you've really gone and done like an in-depth interview with them to paint the picture of what the before was like and what the after is
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, Being able to even something as simple as communicating your offer in terms of a job description or a promise. Something as simple as that can be a really powerful way to make it easy for buyers to say yes. Oftentimes, we're so close to the work that we do, we're so close to the offer, we're excited about everything that it includes. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about features and benefits of the offer itself, versus the transformation, right? Like nobody buys a plane ticket, everyone buys a vacation or a trip. So I think being able to, frame your offer in terms of a job description. So, buyers work with me so that they can X, Y, and Z is really important. Or framing it in terms of a promise. I help busy professionals reclaim their time. That would be an example of like a program promise. So I think those three things are ways that everyone can start to de-risk their offer, make it more clear, and make it more compelling and easy for people to say yes.
Great suggestions. Really great suggestions. I know I'm cognizant of our time, and I'm just wondering what things that you and I haven't talked about yet, but you know, because you're the expert, that would really add value to us as wow, that was an amazing, question that you shared with us, and a solution that's going to help us. So what haven't we covered yet that you feel is another one of your gems that we should take away with us before we say goodbye to each other?
Thank you. Okay, so so many. I'll try to be brief and just include a couple. I would say we've talked a little bit about how AI is sort of transforming the sales and buying landscape. I think one way to leverage it into your like into the way that you sell, that could be really helpful, is to get this app called Fathom. So it is a really powerful, basically, note taker. It'll sit in on your sales conversations. And what you can do after, it has this like ask Fathom function after, where you're like, okay, I need you to basically give it prompts, just like you would give ChatGPT a prompt. And you can ask it, what were the key themes that came up? It can help you craft a really powerful follow-up sales email after the sales call. So I think that might be something that a lot of people aren't yet put onto, but Fathom is a really powerful app in that way.
Well, that would be good, because they will be objective, and they will have listened to everything. The summary of the conversation is that this client will da 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 da, and these are steps, and then you then say, thanks for the call today. What we talked about was this. It sounds like these are the things that are really important to you.
Exactly.
Like, wow, thank you, Fathom, right?
Yeah. And then you can be present in the conversation, because I find sometimes people feel pressure to like take notes, think about, like, okay, how am I going to frame this after the fact? It allows you to be a little more present. The other cool thing that it allows you to do is you can go in and be like, well, what were the key pain points, and what have they, tried to solve this on their own? That can give you a good idea of like what content you can produce. So it's a really powerful AI tool that I find is helpful from a sales perspective. The other thing I would recommend that we haven't talked about is going to ChatGPT, because ChatGPT was trained on Reddit threads. They can access Reddit threads, and Reddit threads, a lot of stuff happens on Reddit. Like there's a lot of people that are going there to do research, to have discussions. And so I will often ask it, what are the biggest pain points that you're seeing? Like, what are the top threads that are happening in, the sales landscape? So it's a great place to do research, and AI is really good at helping you with that. So if I could just say like one thing, it would be use AI in sales to help you conduct your research and to become more efficient with, say, the meeting summaries. I would be hesitant to use it in your outreach, and a lot of people are doing that with these various platforms like Dripify or Copilot, where AI is doing the reaching out and having conversations on behalf of you. I would be reticent, and I don't advise that, but it is a powerful tool for research.
Okay. I've been using ChatGPT, and it's important people ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Right? If you ask them something generic, you're going to get something generic, but use your expertise in your product and services and who you are, and drill down and ask those key questions. But the other thing I would caution is that ChatGPT or others may not be, like, you should validate the research that they state, because sometimes they're getting it from sources that are not like accurate. So I use it for my research, but then if I like a piece of research, I will try to find the source that they said and make sure that I see it in writing on that platform and that it's a valid, credible source kind of stuff. So
you got to trust but verify.
There.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust but verify.
How do people get what's next for you, Talitha?
Yeah. Well, I think that what's next for me, I'm really excited about it. I'm working on a book about sales. So this will be like a contrarian's approach to sales for non-sales people. Because there's a lot of books about like how to sell if you're already a salesperson. This is for people who don't see themselves as salespeople. And I'm trying to develop a sales training, because I think, much of how we've approached sales or been taught how to do sales isn't serving a lot of us. And so I'm developing my own training that will hopefully remedy that. I
love that. You are a contrarian. All of the information you shared are so practical and supportive and relationship building. I've got notes: the cost of an action, curiosity, reframing and aligning things so that you're thinking, use your own language. Am I connecting to provide service or advocacy rather than sales? And when you own it and you speak that language of your confidence, you will connect with people and create that know, like, and trust factor a lot more readily than when you have a sales mindset and you look nervous and they're not going to buy from you because it looks like snake oil. Stuff. So thank you so much. How do people get a hold of you? Because I think you are worth having a conversation with to help people gain that confidence in sales.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm on LinkedIn, Talica Davies on LinkedIn.
And can you spell that? Because some people will be listening and they'll say TH.
Yeah. So it's Talica, Talitha. And then Davis is Davies. Neither of my names are spelled the way that they're pronounced. So follow me on LinkedIn, or you could sign up for my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter about sales. It's called the Revenue Rundown. And you can access that from my LinkedIn.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and really giving this novel, user-friendly to non-salespeople approach to sales. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Hilda. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure here, and so enjoyable. I always love conversations to get to know the experts and their experiences and their suggestions. So thank you again. And to those of you who are listening or viewing, give this one a thumbs up. Encourage others to listen, because this has been amazing pieces of advice that many of us as entrepreneurs say, wow, that was easy. Click the button. I could try that. I could do that. And I bring on experts to really help us be better entrepreneurs. So if you don't want to miss a great episode, then subscribe and like. Thank you. Have a great day and rev up your business. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. For more HR tips, strategies, and to learn how you can create a people-centric workplace, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.